The days that lie ahead will not be ordinary ones. You can feel it even now. A stirring beneath the quiet hum of your daily routine. A trembling in the unseen world. It is as though the air itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. There are moments in history when heaven draws near, when the veil between the seen and the unseen thins, and the faithful are summoned to attention. This, my dear listener, is such a moment. The coming days are not simply part of the endless turning of the calendar. They are a divine intersection where purpose meets obedience, where destiny demands your readiness. You, the chosen ones, are not called because you are the strongest, the wisest, or the most prepared. You are called because your heart still listens. The world has grown loud with deception, its noise drowning out the still, small voice that speaks truth, yet within you remains a spark that refuses to dim. A hunger for meaning that no possession, no praise, and no pleasure can satisfy. That hunger is not a weakness, it is the mark of your calling. For God does not seek those who are already complete, but those who are willing to be transformed. The days ahead will test you, not merely in your endurance, but in your discernment. There will be moments when right and wrong will appear cloaked in the same garment, when truth will seem harsh and falsehood comforting. The enemy does not always arrive as a roaring lion. Sometimes he comes disguised as light, whispering promises that sound holy but lead to chains. This is why your vigilance must rise above emotion. Feelings will betray you, but faith will not. You must learn to see with spiritual eyes, to trust the voice that calls you upward. Even when the road bends into shadow, do not mistake God's silence for absence. He is not still because he is idle. He is still because he is positioning. When heaven prepares to move, it first rearranges the unseen. The breaking of comfort, the stirring of unease, the closing of certain doors. These are not punishments, but preparations. You have prayed for divine movement, yet divine movement often begins with divine disruption. What you perceive as loss may in truth be liberation. What you call delay may be design. Every shaking is an invitation to stand upon firmer ground. There will come a moment soon when the winds of change will no longer whisper, but roar. You will be asked to choose, to cling to what is fading, or to step into what is forming. Those who hesitate will find themselves caught between worlds. Too bound to the past to move forward, too aware of truth to return to ignorance. But you, if you will trust, will witness the hand of God make straight the path through the impossible. His movement will not always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it will be as subtle as the turning of a page in the story he has written for you. Therefore, prepare not by storing things, but by strengthening your faith. Prepare not by fearing the future, but by anchoring yourself in eternal truth. The coming days are crucial not because they bring destruction, but because they bring decision. Heaven's movement is near, and with it, the unveiling of purpose for those who dared to believe when belief was costly. The choice is not whether God will move. He surely will. But whether you will be found moving with him when he does. There are moments in time when the ordinary rhythm of life slows, and something sacred begins to stir beneath its surface. These are not random seasons, but appointed ones. Divine intersections where heaven leans close to earth, and purpose stands waiting to meet obedience. It is in such times that the soul feels a quiet unrest, a sense that the familiar patterns of yesterday no longer satisfy, that the comforts of the present can no longer hold the weight of what is coming. When you feel this stirring, it is not confusion, it is calling. The Creator does not move without reason, and when he does, he invites his chosen to move with him. Every divine intersection begins in stillness. Before God acts outwardly, he awakens something inwardly. The path toward destiny is never built upon impulse, but upon intention. Those who sense the pull of purpose often find themselves standing at a threshold where obedience is the only door. To obey is not merely to act, it is to surrender, to trust the unseen direction of a voice that speaks beyond logic. Many wait for a sign, a vision, or a miracle, not realizing that the sign has already been placed within them, a quiet knowing that refuses to fade. When purpose calls, it rarely arrives with comfort, it arrives with conviction. In such moments, the heart becomes a battlefield between what is known and what is promised. The familiar whispers of safety tempt you to stay where you are, while the voice of faith beckons you into unknown waters. It is easy to mistake comfort for peace, but they are not the same. Comfort soothes the flesh, peace strengthens the soul. Purpose requires movement, and movement demands trust. The intersection between purpose and obedience is not a destination, it is a decision. Those who hesitate at that crossroads often find that delay becomes distance, and distance dulls the voice that once felt near. When God ordains a movement, it is not to elevate your name, but to fulfill his will through your willingness. He could accomplish his plans without human hands, yet he chooses to involve them, not because he needs them, but because he delights in partnership. Your obedience becomes the vessel through which divine intention manifests in the visible world. Every act of trust, every unseen sacrifice, every quiet yes, whispered in the dark carries eternal weight. The heavens move not because of noise, but because of alignment. When the heart of a believer aligns with the rhythm of God's will, the unseen begins to shift. At the intersection of purpose and obedience, pride dies and clarity is born. You begin to see that purpose is never about self-glorification. It is about divine revelation. To obey is to recognize that your story is part of something far greater, something woven through eternity. The steps you take in faith are not isolated. They ripple through generations, shaping outcomes you may never witness. What feels like a small act of obedience today may become the foundation upon which God builds tomorrow's miracles. The crucial truth is that obedience is not a response to understanding, but an act of trust. You may not see the full picture, but you are called to move when the voice says, "Go." Faith is not built by explanations, but by experience. Each step taken in obedience becomes proof that purpose was real all along. It is in the act of stepping forward, not in standing still, that revelation unfolds. When purpose meets obedience, heaven and earth align, and the ordinary becomes sacred. The moment you choose to trust, even without sight, the divine intersection transforms from uncertainty into destiny. Those who are chosen rarely recognize themselves as such at first. The world has taught them to measure worth by strength, to equate calling with visible greatness. Yet the ways of heaven do not follow the measures of men. The chosen ones are not summoned because they are mighty in their own power or flawless in their own wisdom. They are chosen because, despite their weakness, their hearts still respond to the quiet pull of truth. They carry within them a tenderness that the world calls fragility, but heaven calls readiness. God does not seek perfect vessels, he seeks open ones. The most powerful instruments in divine hands are often those who once felt too broken to be of use. It is a humbling mystery that divine purpose begins not with accomplishment, but with surrender. The world celebrates those who appear strong, confident, and complete, but heaven draws near to the contrite, the teachable, and the willing. In the silence of surrender, a transformation begins. The soul that once depended on its own understanding learns to lean upon the whisper of the Spirit. The one who once fought to be seen now longs only to be aligned. The chosen ones are shaped not by comfort, but by refinement. Every wound becomes a window through which light enters, every trial a teacher that refines their vision. Through what they endure, they learn that true strength is born in dependence. This calling is not an escape from hardship, but an invitation to purpose. When God marks a soul for his work, he does not remove struggle, he redeems it. The pain that once seemed meaningless becomes the very soil in which faith grows. The loneliness that once felt unbearable becomes the space where divine companionship is discovered. The chosen ones come to realize that every loss, every unanswered prayer, every detour was never wasted. It was all part of the preparation for a destiny they could not yet comprehend. Transformation does not occur in the absence of difficulty, but through it. It is within the fire that the gold is purified. Many will not understand the process. To others, the chosen ones may appear uncertain or ordinary, perhaps even unremarkable, but heaven sees differently. While the world looks at the surface, God looks at the substance. He sees hearts that have been humbled, wills that have been softened, and spirits that have learned to yield. These are the ones he entrusts with his movements, for they will not try to steal his glory. Their strength lies not in their confidence, but in their dependence, not in their eloquence, but in their authenticity. The power that flows through them is not their own. It is borrowed from eternity, channeled through obedience. The transformation of the chosen ones is continual. Just as clay remains pliable in the potter's hands, so must they remain teachable in his presence. Each new season calls for deeper surrender, for the journey of faith is not a single act of obedience, but a lifetime of yielding. With every step, the old self dies a little more, and the divine image within them shines a little brighter. The world will not always understand this process, for it values arrival more than transformation. But heaven values the becoming. To be chosen is not to be exalted above others, but to be entrusted with carrying light into darkness. The chosen ones are not perfect, they are willing. They walk by faith, shaped by the unseen, drawn forward by a voice that calls them not because they are worthy, but because they are willing to be made worthy. There are seasons when heaven seems silent, when prayers echo into stillness, and the presence that once felt near appears to withdraw into mystery. In such times, faith is tempted to believe that silence means absence, that waiting means neglect. Yet divine silence is never emptiness. It is preparation. God is not still because he has forgotten his people. He is still because he is arranging the unseen. Before every great movement of his hand, there is a quiet reordering of the invisible realm. The noise of delay hides the activity of design. The heart that trusts learns to interpret silence not as distance, but as a sacred pause before transformation. When God prepares to move, he does not begin with the visible world. He starts in the hidden places, in hearts, in motives, in foundations. What appears still on the surface is often the result of a deep and unseen stirring beneath. The soil is being turned, roots are being strengthened, and weaknesses are being exposed. The divine craftsman does not rush his work, for what he builds is meant to last beyond a moment. His movements are deliberate, precise, and often misunderstood. Those who expect immediate results may grow restless, but those who understand the rhythm of heaven learn to rest even in suspense. The silence of God has purpose. It creates dependence where there was control. It purifies motives that were mixed with ambition. It tests faith to reveal what is genuine and what is borrowed. In silence, You learn to listen differently, to perceive the small movements of grace that words cannot describe. The chosen ones must learn to dwell in this hidden classroom, where lessons are taught through waiting and understanding grows through stillness. What feels like divine distance is often divine drawing, for in quietness the heart becomes sensitive again. The noise of the world fades, and the soul begins to hear whispers that would otherwise be drowned in distraction. Every great awakening is preceded by a season of quiet testing. Before the flood, there was Noah's years of building. Before the Exodus, centuries of slavery. Before the resurrection, 3 days of silence. The pattern repeats through time, divine stillness before divine intervention. It is in the stillness that God measures the patience of his servants, the depth of their trust, and the purity of their obedience. The moment heaven moves is never random. It is appointed. What seems delayed to man is perfectly timed in eternity. When circumstances shake and doors close, it is easy to assume something has gone wrong, yet often these very disruptions are the proof that God is preparing the way. He closes certain paths not out of cruelty, but protection. He removes what cannot survive the next season. The shaking that feels like loss is in truth a clearing of space for new life. The silence between the promise and its fulfillment is not a void. It is the sacred ground where trust grows its roots. The soul that endures this season without resentment becomes the soil through which God's movement will later bloom. There is a divine order in waiting. The heart must be quieted before it can hear instruction. The will must be softened before it can obey fully. The vision must be purified before it can guide others. Those who resist this process chase after noise and mistake activity for progress. But those who yield to the silence begin to see differently. They learn that the absence of motion does not mean the absence of meaning. God often works most powerfully when he seems most hidden. The unseen rearrangement of events, people, and timing becomes clear only after the movement begins. The silence, then, was not a void. It was the breath before the storm, the pause before the unveiling, the stillness before the voice speaks again. There comes a moment when the path of faith divides sharply between what is fading and what is forming. The soul stands at a threshold where the familiar offers comfort, but the divine calls for courage. The chosen ones will soon find themselves at this crossroad, where heaven's movement demands alignment rather than observation. The question is not whether God will act. He surely will. But whether his people will move with him when he does. The coming days will not simply unfold, they will reveal. They will expose who truly trusts and who merely waits for proof. The time of passive belief is passing, and the hour of decisive obedience is drawing near. Every divine shift requires release. The hands that cling to the past cannot receive the new thing being given. Yet letting go is never easy. The old season, though imperfect, feels familiar. It has shaped your habits, built your identity, and offered stability. But the comfort of yesterday can become the cage of tomorrow if it is held too tightly. God calls his people to release not out of cruelty, but out of love. He knows that new purpose cannot bloom in soil crowded by old roots. When he begins to move, he first loosens the grip of what once was. Doors close, plans unravel, relationships shift, all to make space for what aligns with his unfolding design. This alignment is not achieved by chance, but by choice. To move with God means to surrender your own timing, your own reasoning, and sometimes your own desires. It is an inward turning of the heart, a willingness to follow without full understanding. Those who align with heaven's movement learn that obedience often feels costly before it feels clear. The mind resists what the spirit already knows. Yet in that tension lies transformation. The moment you choose alignment over comfort, purpose over familiarity, the unseen begins to rearrange around your obedience. What felt impossible becomes natural because it is now supported by divine momentum. There will be voices urging you to stay where you are. They will speak of caution, tradition, and logic, but faith will whisper a different message. It will tell you that staying behind is safer, yet emptier. The world clings to what it can measure. The chosen ones follow what they can discern. To align with God is to step into movement, even before the path is fully visible. Each act of trust becomes a bridge built in real time. You cannot see the end, but you sense that the one leading you has already gone before. Alignment is not about understanding the plan, it is about trusting the planner. The decision to move with God is often made in silence, long before it is seen by others. It is a quiet surrender of control, a deep inner yes that reshapes everything that follows. Once that decision is made, the world may still look unchanged, but within, a shift has occurred. The heart begins to move in rhythm with heaven's pulse. Fear loses its authority, and faith takes command. You begin to discern divine patterns in what once appeared chaotic. The steps that once felt uncertain now carry the weight of purpose. Those who align with God's movement do not escape challenge, they transcend it. Their strength is not found in resistance, but in harmony with the divine flow. To move with God is to recognize that His direction, though mysterious, always leads toward life. The past may call out, demanding that you turn back to what feels safe, but the spirit within knows that safety is not the same as destiny. The world around you may shift, but the anchor of obedience will hold you steady. Every act of alignment draws you deeper into the unfolding of a story written long before your birth, a story in which heaven's movement finds its reflection in your willingness to follow. Faith is not tested in moments of abundance, but in seasons of uncertainty, when the light of understanding fades and only trust remains. The chosen ones are not called to walk easy paths, but sacred ones, where each step forward must be taken without seeing the next. In these coming days, the strength of belief will be measured not by words, but by endurance. The storms that rise will not come to destroy, but to reveal what was truly built on the rock. Every wave that shakes the surface exposes the foundation beneath. Those whose faith rests on emotion will falter, but those anchored in conviction will stand unmoved. Trust in God is not a feeling that visits occasionally. It is a posture of the soul, a steady confidence in the one who governs what cannot be understood. When you can no longer trace His hand, you must still trust His heart. The absence of clarity is not the absence of care. God does not lead you into confusion to leave you there. He leads you into dependence so that your strength may shift from self to spirit. The coming trials will demand this deeper trust. You will be asked to believe without evidence, to hope without signs, and to stand when everything around you whispers that surrender would be easier. Faith matures in darkness. The seed that is buried cannot see the sun, yet it grows toward it. So it is with the soul. The hidden seasons, the unanswered prayers, the long silences, all become the soil of unseen growth. Trust is not proven in answered requests, but in the peace that holds even when the request is denied. The chosen ones are being refined into vessels that can carry divine power without pride, and such refinement can only occur through testing. Every disappointment is a question whispered by heavens. Will you still believe? Every delay asks the same. Will you still wait? To trust in God is to lay down the right to control outcomes. It is to walk knowing that your map is drawn by unseen hands. The flesh demands certainty, but faith thrives on surrender. The human heart longs to see before it steps, yet heaven calls it to step before it sees. This is the paradox that separates believers from observers. The observer watches for evidence. The believer moves because of conviction. In these coming days, trust will become the defining mark of the chosen. The storms will not destroy those who trust. They will reveal them. There is a sacred strength that comes from surrender. The one who truly trusts does not need to manipulate or strive. They rest, not in apathy, but in assurance. Trust releases the need to rush, for the one who walks with eternity does not fear delay. God's timing is never late, because it is not measured by human clocks, but by divine intention. The moment you release your grip on control, peace begins to rise like dawn after a long night. It is not that the circumstances change, but that your heart aligns with the one who governs them. The trust God desires is not shallow optimism. It is unshakable confidence in his character. It believes even when outcomes defy logic, because it knows the one who promised cannot fail. The chosen ones are not defined by their ability to predict, but by their willingness to persevere. Every trial will refine their trust, every delay will deepen it, and every unanswered question will draw them closer to the center of divine will. Trust does not remove difficulty. It transforms it. It turns fear into faith, doubt into discipline, and waiting into worship. The coming days will separate those who trust God's power from those who merely admire it. For the difference between them will determine who stands when the winds begin to blow.